But anyway, fascinating discussion. Next guy, very, very interesting. Some people might consider it controversial. Don't know. You take your chances. See how you go with this. Okay, Pete, Gavin back with the final word. And as you know, we're currently talking to candidates that are standing for election in the Highlands, in the general election. And we have another candidate that's kindly joined us, and his name is Richard. Hi, Richard.
Good morning.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your full name, the party that you're standing for, and where you're standing?
Well, Richard Lucas. I'm standing in Ross, Skye and Lochaber for the Scottish Family Party.
And Richard, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your background?
My background is I'm originally English. I've been in Scotland for about 24 years now. Married to a Scotswoman. I've got 2 sons here as well. My background is teaching. I was teaching in boarding schools, involved in sort of residential care as well. I came to Scotland for a job in that line, and that's what I was doing until sort of 18 months ago, where I then moved to working on the Scottish Family Party full time.
So were you involved in any politics before you got involved in the Scottish Family Party, or?
Yeah, quite a history of being involved in politics. I was a member of the Conservative Party a long, long time ago. I decided I wanted to get more involved in politics. So I thought about maybe trying to see if I could be a candidate for the Conservative Party. But I realised that was never going to happen, because some of my views are too conservative, basically, for the Conservative Party. So I realised I'd be just charging at a brick wall there, and there's no way I would get through their selection system or be able to represent them, because they don't really represent Conservative values anymore. I was involved with a little group of people who thought about starting a new party. So socially conservative, Christian values sort of party. So I was involved with that for a while, but that didn't really get off the ground. Then I thought, okay, so I need to go and join a party. What's the only option? What's the only party where I might be able to survive? So I tried UKIP, but I was virtually kicked out of UKIP, having given a speech about freedom of speech, believe it or not. So I got to the point where I thought there's no party that really represents the values that I think are important, and the values that are not spoken about in politics in Scotland and the UK. So that the only option left is to start something new. So myself and another little group of people decided it was time for something new in Scottish politics. So we formed the Scottish Family Party just a couple of years ago, and here we are today.
And from what you're saying there, the public would probably, in those first few sentences, if they're not familiar with the party, which I imagine a few won't be, you would probably say that you're on the right of centre there.
We're neutral on almost all the issues you'd normally associate with being right-wing and left-wing. So we don't, for example, what should the tax rate be? We don't have a policy on whether the tax should go up or down. Our important policy on tax is we think that tax allowance should be transferable for married couples. But that's a really important issue that would help families make their own decisions about how to bring up their kids.
Is it not sort of part of that? It's transferable already, isn't it?
A very small part is a sort of token gesture. Yes, we would make it completely transferable, and the way it used to be in decades gone by, and the way it is in most of the European countries, I think.
And can you sum up for us other policies of the Scottish Family Party so that we can get a real handle on if people choose to vote for it, what the Scottish Family Party stands for, real practical policies in terms of Scotland and the Highlands?
Our strapline's normally filling the void in Scottish politics. So a lot of our policies are completely different from all the other parties. Then we're not just entering into the debates that are already happening. We're often trying to start new debates and bring new things to the surface. So we're pro-family, so in terms of trying to give families choice, and in terms of opposing state interference in family life, which is coming from lots of different directions, particularly with the SNP, but from all the parties. So we want to get families autonomy.
No, it would be fair to say no party would describe itself as anti-family, would they, Richard?
They wouldn't describe themselves in that way, but if you look at what they do, then I think effectively they are. If you look at the SNP's strategy, for example, they've proposed a new redefinition of child abuse that will class things like making a child feel that their feelings are not valued. That would be classed as child abuse. Now, within that's going to undermine parents.
So do you think that a child's feelings shouldn't be valued? That's the immediate sort of response that people might have to that from what you said, you feel that the SNP policy over valuing a child's feelings is wrong, and that somehow the feelings of the parents should be overvalued over the child's.
No, that's not what I said at all, and that doesn't follow logically at all from what I said.
Okay, tell me what, if I've misunderstood, tell me what you said again, Richard.
The SNP want to class making a child feel that their feelings are not valued. They want to class that as child abuse. Like, you're in court, you're prosecuted, children taken away, or whatever. Or to make a child feel that their opinions are not valued. Or to expose a child to anger. Now, these are things that we think, this is not child abuse. They're not descriptions of child abuse. What they are, what that would be an excuse for unnecessary state intervention in family life in many, many circumstances. Now, we think that's, to say those things are child abuse, we think this is quite extreme and bizarre. And yet, within Scottish politics, there's no other party even talking about these things. This has been proposed by the SNP. It should be a huge controversy. It's an open goal for the other parties to say, what is going on here? This is just bizarre. And yet they just don't say anything. They just keep droning on about Brexit, independence, all the usual things. Well, this sort of thing just goes unnoticed. And part of our job is to bring these things to people's attention. And when people are aware of them, they're very concerned, and they think, there is something wrong here. We do need a voice to challenge these sort of things. Right, so that was, I say, pro-family. I could have talked about other things as well. Let's move on. Pro-marriage. I think family breakdown is a major problem in Scottish society. And a lot of really deep-seated problems that the government focuses on and tries to solve, finds them quite difficult to solve. A lot of them, some of their roots are in family breakdown. So if you can tackle family breakdown, that would have a knock-on effect in helping to alleviate a lot of other very deep-seated problems. And the evidence suggests very strongly that one of the most effective ways for promoting stable family life is through marriage. So we try to promote a culture of marriage. Now, that's something that costs very little, could be extremely effective, seems an obvious policy for a government to look at. And yet, as I say, the other parties are just not interested in it.
But how do you think the state intervenes to promote marriage and emotion? Because most marriages break down at an emotional level. It's not a financial one that causes the breakup. So what role does the state have in that? You obviously, in your previous statement, you're pointing to the area that you think that the state is overstepping the mark in what is classed as child abuse. So in that sense, you're promoting the fact that the state, you're saying, has an whether I agree or not, it's a different matter, but has an adverse effect on the way that society would view children's anger and their value of their feelings. But on this front, how do you, in practical terms, propose that the state promotes and supports marriage in practical terms?
Right, there's three ways the state can promote marriage. The first one is through the education system. It doesn't need to be some message that's preached. All that needs to be done is to present young people with the facts related to marriage and relationship stability. And the evidence is overwhelming that marriage totally transforms the potential outlook for a relationship in the future. And I can understand why that is, because the public commitments, etc., changes the nature of the relationship. So present young people with the evidence so they can then make their own decisions based on that evidence. I think that would be a very powerful thing. At the moment, they're too busy promoting masturbation and pornography and all sorts of degrading sex acts in sex education, and they haven't got any time left for promoting marriage.
So you feel that in Scottish schools that masturbation and pornography is being promoted?
Definitely, yes.
Can you give me an example of that?
Yes, to talk about pornography in particular, look at the resources, the lesson plans produced by the Scottish government's agencies. They have messages like, pornography is to sexually arouse us, and that's great. And then we'll say things like, have fun with pornography. So it's quite clear-cut promotion. It's not just teaching about pornography.
So you're saying, let's clarify this. That you're saying that the Scottish Government education policy has got printed leaflets or educational materials that say pornography is fun and we should enjoy it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
well, that's something I'm not aware of. I think people will find that hard to believe. So it'd be great if you could come back to us with the actual name of that leaflet or the documents that do that, Richard, because I'm not aware of that. I'd be very shocked if it's framed in that way that children are being given leaflets that say pornography is fun and there's an advocacy of pornography by the state, then people would be very concerned about that. But we need to know the name of the leaflet, when it was published, and who it's being distributed to.
Yeah.
So if you can give me that.
Just to clarify that, the message in the lesson plans is that there are some dangers with pornography. Some of it's too extreme. You can get addicted or whatever. But the message is avoid those dangers. But if you can avoid those dangers, go ahead and have fun with pornography. And what I'm talking about there is the content of a video from a lesson plan that's produced by the government agencies involved in it. You can find those resources at rshp.scot, and you can find the specific information that I'm talking about. If you go to the Scottish Family Party YouTube channel, you'll see a few videos. One, for example, Filth, the promotion of perverted pornography in Scottish schools, the title, something like that, so people can go and see for themselves. I quite understand that you find it difficult to believe. It is difficult to believe, isn't it, that the government's promoting pornography to children?
I think we have to go away and look at that, and we'll make our own judgment. Thanks very much for that information. So, and the other thing that people might say is, well, we've got to be slightly realistic about the situation, because it's not in the old days where a couple of the older boys at school have managed to obtain some magazines and they're hidden in the bush behind the bike sheds. The trouble is that we're deluged by pornography, really. And there's no point in the old days of not discussing it in school, which is how it used to be, which interestingly also brings us back to the fact that, my experience of modern schools, of which I'm in and out of, is that, in fact, that valuing of children's feelings has totally changed the culture in the school in terms of the way that people relate to teachers and the kids relate amongst themselves.
Okay, just sticking with this valuing of feelings, my point is that the Scottish Government is proposing a definition of child abuse. Child abuse, that's something that you're prosecuted for, your kids are taken away, on something as vague and subjective as that. So I'm not saying you shouldn't value children's feelings. Obviously, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying as a definition of child abuse, that's quite bizarre. Now, coming back to pornography, the response you gave there is the response you normally get from people, and we would agree. I would think definitely you need to talk to children about pornography, and I think there's very helpful messages that can be delivered to them, but the message shouldn't be go ahead and have fun. I mean, there's a video that the Scottish Government are commending for use in lessons that says, if you don't just want to watch straight white people having sex, you need to explore some different types of pornography. One of them, it suggests, is mature pornography, and it has a cartoon image of someone having sex with someone with a Zimmer frame. This is the education resources produced by the SNP, and no one seems to care. Apart from the Scottish Family Party, no one seems to care. People just seem to, so what? We're not interested.
So what you're saying is this is educational literature.
But this is a video from a lesson plan I'm talking about.
A video from a lesson plan, and that's an official, you're claiming that's an official government lesson plan that includes...
Commended by John Swinney,
a cartoon where somebody's having sex with somebody who's with a Zimmer frame.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Disgusting.
Okay, then, we'll need to look at the context for that. I've never heard of this before. I'm shocked when you put it like that, but let's just see how that pans out. Now, where do you stand on things like gay marriage? You say you support marriage.
You asked me how you could promote marriage. I said you could promote it in education, promote it through the tax system, like, say, transferable allowance, and the other way to promote marriage is through cultural leadership. So if the Scottish Family Party had MSPs, that'd be something they'd be talking about, writing about, not passing laws, but just talking about, writing about, talking about in their interview, etc. Right, well, same-sex marriage.
Hang on one second, Richard. Sorry, just take you back, because as I said before to you, I was saying that I understand that your policy is to advocate financially the institution of marriage by supporting it through the tax system. I wondered, what are the practical? Most marriages break down at an emotional level, and it shouldn't be underestimated. Like 1 in 2 marriages, it's something very close to that anyway. 1 in 2 marriages break down. Now, how can government intervene at that emotional level? What are the tools that government are going to provide to communities in order to prevent the emotional breakdown of a relationship between two people?
Well, one of our policies is to make relationship counselling more widely available and to be presenting that option to people. But I think the breakdown in a relationship is less likely when the nature of the relationship, the foundation of that relationship, is a mutual, public, lifelong commitment. I think that changes the nature of the relationship and produces a more stable outlook for that couple. I think the evidence for that is overwhelming. Obviously, things don't always work out, but the statistical evidence that say it is absolutely overwhelming that marriage makes a very, very substantial difference to relationship.
But the difficulty we've got, you're still in a situation where you may well know the figures better than me, but my understanding is about 1 in 2 marriages break down.
I'm not sure if that's correct in Britain, but if you look at the relationship stability for marriage compared to cohabiting couples, I mean, the difference is just absolutely huge.
But what can the state do if people, I take your point that, that legally binding institution of marriage, that commitment between two people is desirable, and you feel that that's more suitable for environment for bringing up children, perhaps. But the question is still, whether it's 1 in 2 or 1 in 3, it's still a big number of marriages that fail. What can the state do to intervene at that? Because really it's an emotional relationship between two people before it's the financial, before it's all these other things.
Yeah, I said relationship counselling could play a part. But then the emotional side, the human side of relationships as well, is influenced quite strongly, I think, by the foundation of that relationship. Whether the nature of the relationship is, or, we happen to be living together for the time being because that suits us both. But let's see how
is that something that the government can? Is that something that government has a role in? What can government do about that? It's an emotional breakdown. Most marriages. It's not usually a financial one.
As I said, I think the fact of a marriage does change the emotional landscape within the relationship as well, even outside any direct action. I say there's a matter of cultural leadership. So Scottish Family Party representatives would make it their job to be promoting marriage in society. So if you're an MSP, you're probably promoting marriage.
Sorry to press you on it, Richard, but promoting marriage as an institution doesn't necessarily make it more successful. In fact, it may not help that at all. You see what I mean? So what I'm quizzing you about the fact is that marriages that are legal, that are with a document, not cohabitees, but they have a large breakdown rate anyway. And what can government do about that?
We're talking statistically. I mean, some people smoke 60 cigarettes a day and get run over by a bus when they're 95. But you've got to look at the overall effects. Overall, marriage has a very positive effect on relationship stability.
But you still got a problem that it fails, and it fails in vast numbers. It's a vast proportion of the number of people that get married that now get divorced. Now, the reason I'm pressing you on this is in times past, of course, people's ability to terminate relationships was far more difficult because they were basically financially handcuffed together. So in the days when women didn't get jobs and things like that, they didn't have any freedom to do that. They had very few, within living memory, they had very few options 60, 70 years ago to get out of a relationship, whereas now women work, there's probably better childcare, all that sort of stuff. So it's almost inevitable that increase in breakdown of all relationships, whether marriages or whether cohabitees, is likely to be greater because women have more freedom because they have the independent finances.
Well, that's a relevant factor, but that's not a direction that we're addressing the issue from. We're addressing the issue from the direction where the evidence shows a really strong effect. And it's something that can be done without any cost really to the state and without any cost to people's individual freedom. It's just encouraging people to make the choice to enter into a marriage, which, I say, has far better outcomes, particularly for children.
Okay, and where do you stand on gay marriage then, Richard?
Scottish Family Party doesn't have a policy on same-sex marriage.
And does that mean you approve, or would you like to advocate homosexuals that they get themselves settled in a marriage? Because you're advocating marriage, aren't you?
My personal view is I don't support same-sex marriage. I say, but as a party, we don't have any policy about it. So any policies we have relating to marriage would apply equally to all marriages.
And where do you stand on things like gay rights and things like that?
Gay rights in what regard?
Well, I just mean, do you have any policy regarding that? Do you feel that there should be education about that in schools or not?
I think some degree of education is relevant. I think what we've got at the moment is wall-to-wall indoctrination in schools. I mean, there's the government policy now is there has to be LGBT content in every subject of the curriculum and from nursery upwards. And we very definitely oppose that. So right from 3-year-olds in nursery, they're given the message that a family can be a mum and a dad, or two mums or two dads, or two mums and two dads. Basically, any combination of adults, male or female, can form a family, and that's great. That's something to be celebrated as a wonderful aspect of diversity. Then as soon as they're in primary school, they get in the message that babies can be made in lots of different ways. There's, mum and dad can have sex, have babies that way, but also there's lots of other ways of making babies as well. So, as I say, any combination of men and women can have a family and produce children, and that's great. And I would disagree with that message. And that mum and dad and the kids is a natural family is the ideal.
But do you not think in this day and age, as it happens, a lot of children don't have the benefit of being brought up in a normal heterosexual, or you might class it normal heterosexual couple situation that are married? There's a lot of kids in school that have come out of different backgrounds. Do you not think that if you don't include that education that you're excluding some of those children?
Well, it's not a matter of saying that different sorts of family forms, whatever, don't exist. Of course they exist. But the message given to children, right from age 3, is that all these different family structures are equally valid and they're all absolutely great, which is a message that I would disagree with. They're attacking the ideal of natural family. They're trying to relativize it and say that's just one form among many others that are equally valid.
And
whether you agree with the message or not, people can say, come on, surely 3-year-olds, can we not leave the indoctrination out at that stage? But the government wants to be right in there from the very beginning of nursery, attacking the ideal of natural family.
Okay, I want to ask you this, Richard. What do you see as the way that, if we're talking indoctrination, in Scottish schools, how do you see that religion should be taught then?
That's not something we have a policy on particularly. We do favour the idea of diverse schools, and we agree with the SNP on this one, that if a group of parents feel that the mainstream schools are not representing their values, and they want to come together to form a new school that does represent their values, we'd be very supportive of that. In terms of religious education, I think that's fairly uncontroversial, learning about different religions. In terms of religious observance, to be honest, outside Catholic schools, I don't think really much of that goes on. I think a lot of what goes on under the banner of religious observance isn't actually that. It's more a sort of secular.
You do get some faith groups that are in certain schools, depends where you are in the country, that seem to get privileged access to the school. And it seems to be just an accepted part of school life. I'm not talking about the usual assemblies and things like that, but the other groups that are given access to the children, and not always, the parents are not always informed, and that usually comes out of, a member of staff has a link to some religious group, and we end up in a situation where, some people would class it as indoctrination has taken place without the parents' knowledge, whether it's Christian or not. To some people's mind, that would be regardless. Doesn't matter whether it's a Christian group, a Muslim group, or a Hindu group, or a Jewish group that's being given privileged access. That would cause a problem for some parents if they didn't know.
Right, we don't have a specific policy on that, but my view would be that if a group comes in with a particularly religious perspective and presents that to the children, I would say the most likely effect on that is to just go a tiny little way to redress the balance from the uniform message that is preached to the kids the rest of the time. So the indoctrination in Scottish schools, it really is at very, very high levels. If you look at the SNP manifesto, and what's taught in schools. I mean, the overlap is, how should we put it, substantial. So they get this uniform sort of human rights, LGBT, feminist, climate change, equality, equity, but all the sort of things. They're straight from the SNP manifesto. And that forms the basis of a lot of aspects of the curriculum. So if different groups come in, giving the children a different viewpoint, particularly older children, then I think that's a good thing.
Okay, Richard, I'm going to move you on slightly because unfortunately we're just limited in the amount of time that we can spend on each candidate because there's quite a few. So, and the reason that we stressed family issues with this, that's clearly the ticket that you're promoting. Which constituency is it that you're standing in, Richard?
Ross, Skye and Lochaber.
And is there another one that you've got any candidates in, or is that the...
We just got one in Eastern Bartonshire.
Eastern Bartonshire. Okay, where do you stand on Brexit?
Our policy on Brexit is the same as our policy on Scottish independence, that we're neutral whether or not it's a good thing, but we do feel that the referendum results should be respected and it shouldn't be revisited for the course of the next Parliament.
Okay, so you believe that the current votes should stand, which is leaving Europe and that Scotland remains?
Yeah, leaving the EU and not having another independence referendum.
Not having another independence
for the course of the next Parliament.
Right, well, I've got to put this to you because I've put it to every other candidate. Would you understand that the ground rules have kind of changed if Scotland gets dragged out of Europe by a vote south of the border in Wales, then Scotland has a right to self-determine?
I think this sort of argument is the sort of thing that dominates Scottish politics, and we think that's the reason why some of the other issues I've brought up, which are really, really serious issues, don't really get the attention they deserve. But I've got my personal view about these things. Within the Scottish Family Party, we've got people, unionists, nationalists, Brexiteers, Remainers. So I could give you my personal view, but I'd actually rather not, because our point as the Scottish Family Party is to try and move people's attention away from these issues to look at some other ones that are really neglected.
Okay, Richard, just to give you that moment then, and people listening will probably be sitting there thinking, especially in this election, what's the point of somebody fielding a different party that's very unique? I don't know what your standing is over there, and I apologise for that, but I would imagine your chances of actually becoming an MP are possibly quite slim. So what's the point of fielding a candidate from the Scottish Family Party? What purpose does it serve?
I think it serves lots of purposes. I think it raises the profile of the party in the constituency. That's very important. I was hoping for lots of opportunities to come face-to-face with the other candidates, particularly Ian Blackford, to challenge him on some things. He seems to be refusing to take part in hustings, so that might not happen. I think also it gives people the opportunity to vote for a party in good conscience. I've come across so many people who think they look at all the other options and they can't in good conscience vote for any of them. So we want to give people the opportunity to vote for something they can in good conscience, that doesn't contradict their moral values or their really deeply held principles. We're a new party at a very early stage. Our ultimate objective is the Scottish parliamentary objective elections, where small parties remember the chance because of the list system. I mean, that's our real target. So we just put a toe in the water this time so that people can see who we are, we can make some contact and just raise awareness of the party.
Yeah, I think that people will understand that, though other people will be listening. I heard at the beginning you said you had a sort of flirtation with the Conservatives, and then you were part of, was it UKIP or the Brexit Party? You said that you'd...
UKIP.
UKIP. And so people will naturally assume that you're affiliated to the more right-wing views of the UKIP party. How would you answer that charge, Richard?
Well, we've got people in the Scottish Family Party who've been in the SNP, people from Labour. We've got people from across the political spectrum. So to look at the party, you've got to look at our policies. You've got to judge a party by its policies. Like, for example, I was in UKIP, so my personal view, obviously, I was very keen to leave the EU. It was never at the top of my priorities. I was very much a Brexiteer. But I've put that aside in the Scottish Family Party in order to focus on these other issues that are really important. And other people in the Scottish Family Party as well have also put aside other views that they hold about political issues in order to focus on these issues that are neglected. So that's one of the many things that makes us unique as a party, that we're bringing together people from across all of the usual divides to unite around the values that we hold.
Okay, just getting to the end of the interview, and Richard, I'm just going to give you a couple of sentences at the end here. So tell us why, if we're able to, we should be voting for the Scottish Family Party.
I think a vote for the Scottish Family Party sends the message to other parties that they're not going to get away with ignoring your values, with heading in this extreme progressive, liberal, secular direction that they're going in, the anti-family direction. The other politicians now assume they can just keep going that way and there's no consequence. Whereas a vote for the Scottish Family Party shows them that actually there is, that people are not going to just keep voting for them as they trample on their most heartfelt values.
Okay, that's Richard Lucas there, talking to Pete Gavin on The Final Word. Thanks very much for joining us, Richard.
Right, thank you very much.